Hey everyone, I'm Henry. I'm a professor of religion and philosophy. I'm talking about a 90-day cleanse from alcohol. So today is day 19, almost 3 weeks, and this will be my third weekend. Um, and I'm finding that I've reached a way of living that I'm very comfortable with. I'm in the habit of not consuming alcohol. I'm thinking maybe it was pretty stupid of me to drink when I was home alone with dinner. Not that I had really any problems with it, but it's really not necessary, and that can become a repeated pattern. So I'm honestly telling you, I'm thinking that maybe that was not such a smart thing. Um, and yet at the same time, going out with friends on the weekend and drinking is not that smart either if I have to drive home. So there's no easy way. But social drinking can be okay if you sober up and you wait several hours. But still it's a problem. So what am I thinking now? Um, I'm thinking that in terms of mood, alcohol provides this really enjoyable peak of dopamine. So the scientists are telling us that alcohol and all drugs are associated with a big increase in dopamine, which is a chemical in the brain. And all drugs create that spike. And some people scientists called it the drug of pleasure, but others are saying really it's a drug of learning. When you learn something or experience something that is good, the brain rewards you for that. So it's more of a reward. So it's hard to say if it's pleasure or reward, but I think pleasure is a big part of it because that's why people like that. So we have this I have this like baseline sense of happiness and mood and contentment. Something good can happen that can raise it. Some bad news can lower it. But overall, that fluctuates. And what I think alcohol does is really give a sense of elevated mood. It has that stimulant effect. That's very pleasurable to experience. Heart rate increases, blood pressure increases, so your brain is firing more, and so it is that definite that peak in dopamine that we experience as euphoria, the wow, this great feeling that lasts for a set time. So that can't be denied. But what I am thinking is that there's no free ride with that because you're going to have to pay that back, right? Because if you've used that, then you sort of go back down afterwards. After the high, there's the die. And what brain scientists are telling us is that the brain actually downregulates that kind of uh, dopamine surge. So the brain actually rewires itself and says, no, there's something not quite right with having that much pleasure associated with taking this drug. So the brain is actually, this is very fascinating to me, actually downregulates the experience, the high of alcohol and dopamine surges. It's almost as if the brain is trying to adapt to it and say, no, that's not good for us. Part of it's this amazing chemical brain has more connections than there are subatomic particles in the universe. So it's a very complex brain. Very tuned, very precisely tuned. So, as one expert says, these big dopamine rushes probably are just not something we are geared for. And I think philosophically, psychologically, spiritually, we need to look at that. That's a very profound statement. That these kind of big pleasure rushes that we can experience from a couple glasses of wine are really not something that we normally experience in nature, not something our brains are used to or something our personalities really even need. We don't need those big fake highs. which are just from taking a drug or a chemical. And I think that's really something profound to look at spiritually, is that for our happiness, for our overall life happiness and contentment, and the sense that we've lived a really great life, it's not really necessary. And it's not necessary to make us happy in the day. I think that's something very profound to think about, that these big rushes, they may feel so good, but they're really not a key to anything. And spiritually, I think sometimes for myself and for others, that rush, that euphoria is sort of a way of thinking, oh, there's a God, that we feel so good that it cheers our hearts. And it becomes a key to maybe something theological. It's maybe a religious experience too, because everything we experience can have a spiritual aspect. But maybe that's not an authentic religious experience. And alcohol and other drugs are used in many cultures as part of religious observances. But maybe we really have to look at that critically again. That high we are getting from alcohol is not really a spiritual high without some sort of payment later. So that's a question that I think I've been thinking about now and want to think about more. So I'm talking about these large, very immediate spikes in dopamine or mood, this elevated mood that people get from alcohol. And if you're trying to give that up, that, for this 90-day challenge, for this cleanse, trying to give that up, there's a certain insecurity, doubt. It causes doubt because you want that. It's hard to give up that very positive feeling, that euphoria, those moments of euphoria. And it's really hard to get that euphoria in other ways that is so strong and so long lasting. But so I will say two things to that argument. It's this argument that no, you don't want to give it up. It's just so pleasurable. Well, there are two things to say about that. One is that you have to pay that back. You're not going to sleep as well. And your mood might actually dip back down as you go down. And those who are addicted to serious drugs really can confirm that there's really a crash after the high. There's a die after the high. So, and we experience that maybe in a lesser sense with more moderate drinking. Secondly, there's another answer to that, in the sense that if your brain is getting that big chemical change, that reward, that pleasure, Friday night at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, you're partying, you're drinking, you're getting that big reward. Your brain probably is not going to experience these kind of rewards later on. So the thing I am really experiencing now in the third week of absolutely no alcohol is that I have like what I would call quick little spikes of real enjoyment, contentment, and pleasure. And it's very subtle, but they're very brief, they're short, they're ephemeral, they don't last long. Like, oh, look at the sunshine, look at the sunrise. Oh, that's so beautiful. Or joking with a friend. Oh, that's so funny. And then just like a little high blip, comes back down. And I would say I am experiencing those more. So I may give up that concentrated, say, hour or two of dopamine rush on Friday night. But I'm experiencing that much more during the day, at every little moment. Even the idea, oh, I've conquered alcohol, I'm doing the 90-day challenge. Even that pride feels very good for a blip. And I'm getting very used to not feeling that alcohol buzz and not really even looking for it. I'm getting much more content in who I am because it sort of lifts us up and takes us away. Now, I'm not saying that's always going to be the case, but I have noticed that there are those two answers to how can you give up the high and buzz of alcohol. Well, two things: you're going to pay it back, and three, you'll experience more of those little spikes all throughout the day. And that's really enjoyable to know that I don't have to get all my pleasure on Friday night at 8. I can go for a walk mid-morning. I just did a 20-mile bike ride yesterday. It's just so great to be able to do that and so fun. And I find that I am really doing more things besides looking forward to Friday night at 8 with friends. Not that that's a bad thing. Now, the other thing I'm noticing is that I am not necessarily going out with friends to bars and clubs as much. And I'm really wondering, it's like, well, if I'm not going to be drinking there, maybe I'm not going because I'm not going to be having any alcohol. And maybe it wasn't so much fun to go out Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. I'm tending not to go out every night like I usually do. And maybe that's because it's really not as much fun without the alcohol. Maybe. Maybe I'm more interested in other things. Or maybe I'm just protecting myself these first few weeks. I really want a solid foundation to this 90-day challenge. So I would recommend that for you too. So look for other fun things to do on the weekend, especially in the evening. And then if you can find that, you'll be more likely to really stay with the 90-day challenge. And so I'm getting to 3 weeks of absolutely no alcohol, no exceptions, even for a wedding. So I'm stuck on my 90 days. I'm very happy to be doing it. I feel really good about it. I really don't miss the idea of drinking alcohol. I'm getting more and more comfortable with, just not having it as part of my life, whether it's for 90 days or forever. Another thing I've learned and I've been thinking about is just how terrible alcohol is for a lot of people. For people I actually know in my life, just normal people who were never big druggies in their youth, but during middle age got into the wine with dinner every evening and more, and it becomes a real problem. And then they choose to slow down or stop altogether. It's so much easier to stop altogether. You make it an either or, a binary. So you're not always questioning, well, I can have a glass of wine here. It's just like, no, it's just the answer's done. No more thinking about it. Move on to other things. And I think that's what you'll find in your 90 days is that you'll move on to other things. So there's been in the news um, a movie star, a celebrity who died as a result of drowning, probably drug affected. And alcohol was a big part of his problems. So we'll see this all the time with celebrities, well-known people, politicians, that alcohol really does this terrible damage to their lives, to their relationships. They've got, in this case, a beautiful wife, children, and they just can't get out of the hole that they have dug with these substances. And it seems that alcohol really is a gateway drug to other substances, because you get that big dopamine rush and you want it even more, and your personality becomes, your spirituality becomes one of searching for that euphoria, which is very natural, right? It's very natural because I think we as human beings want that euphoria, but there's much more to happiness than there's moments of euphoria. And the sad part is that if you damage your brain's processing so much that you can't experience euphoria just doing basic human fun things, then you've done some real damage, and you have to really pay a price for it. So when we see these celebrities, famous people in our own lives, we see what alcohol does to their lives. We can say a couple things. We can say, well, maybe, oh, that's not me because I'm a moderate drinker. I'm just enjoying the good parts without all the negative parts. I'm just doing a little bit, just like food. I'm not obese. I'm just having a proper amount. And that's sort of a defense mechanism. There's some truth to that. But then the question I think we should ask ourselves is, do we want to be using a substance that can destroy human life so many times? There's 10 to 20 million problem drinkers in the United States, 5 to 10% of the population. And we see what it does with very particular people's lives. Is this a good substance to be taking in? Does alcohol really pay? Look what it can really do to a person. A person who has money. These people go in and out of treatment centers, $10,000 or $20,000 a month, and they just cannot get their life back together. It's very tragic. And when you see it from the outside, you see really the substance, the chemical substance, has played such a high role in it. Another thing I've been thinking about is an alcoholic. This was a true story that I read about, and I'll adapt it. There was a man who was a heavy drinker, and his wife was always not liking it, complaining, saying he's an alcoholic. He wasn't terribly abusive, but he was just basically a slob who just came home from work and drank beer all night, watched TV, didn't really do anything else, and enjoyed it and was not horrible. And she said, well, you're an alcoholic. And he said, well, and this was going on for years. And he said, I can stop anytime. And he said, if you stop bothering me about this for 1 year, I will quit absolutely. And he quit for a whole year. He did a 365-day challenge, and he didn't drink. And day 366, he started drinking again the same amount. So just stopping alcohol use does not necessarily mean you have a healthy relationship with alcohol. Yeah, you can stop doing the drug for a year, say, but then when you get back into it. So I'd like like us to have a more of a deeper understanding of why we are not drinking and what we are trying to do in this 90-day challenge. We're not just stopping for 90 days so then we can start it up again. And looking forward to that. And there's got to be something more profound than that. We're really looking at why we're doing this, how it impacts our life. And this 90 days is not just an exercise in sheer willpower, but a time to really understand our relationship with alcohol and or other drugs or other addictive behaviors. And I think we can only really hope to get a good grasp on alcohol with our brains if we don't have alcohol in our brains. So this is the time to really look and think and understand ourselves, who we are. So it's a time of inner growth, not just the not taking alcohol, but really looking at who we are, what motivates us, what do we do with our time, where are our emotions, what are we looking forward to, what is life meaning for us, besides just consuming a chemical with our friends or by ourselves, and that in itself has meaning. That's a question we have to ask ourselves. Does it have meaning? And I think from what I've learned with the past 90 days is that it does not have that much meaning, that euphoria is not really an answer to spiritual questions. It really does not solve the angst that we feel over death, questions of meaning, what's the purpose of it all. It feels good for a while, but it really doesn't count as doing anything.